Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Road to the Metaverse Executive Series episode. We're going to get started in about 2 or 3 minutes as we wait for all of our participants to join. While we wait, I'd love to hear where everyone's joining from. So if you wouldn't mind, post in the chat where you're coming from, your city, your country, whatever you want to share. Would love to just learn who's coming in joining us today. Oh, I think you're right. Chat is disabled. My apologies. If our IT folks are on and are able to turn that on, I'd appreciate it. Perfect. There we go. Thank you very much. All right, good list here. I see Vancouver, Toronto, Tacoma, Washington. I used to live just south of there in Olympia, Florida, Calgary, London. Wonderful. Michigan, Georgia, Brazil, Portland. I lived in Portland as well for a time. Brazil, welcome. Ooh, Nepal, Kathmandu, very place I've never been. I've always wanted to go to. Copenhagen, I'm actually going there next month. Indonesia, India, great list. Dortmund, Germany. All right. More Calgary, Tunisia. Wow, very, very cool. All right, we are probably at critical mass. Let's go ahead and get started. First off, apologies for my voice. I've had a little bit of a cold. Feeling a lot better, but my voice has not quite returned yet. The good news is I will not be the one doing most of the talking. We'll have our host, Ryan, and his guests joining us in a few minutes, so you'll be listening to them. Their voices sound far better than mine does. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We see people from all over the world joining. So excited to have you here joining us for our now 4th episode of the Road to the Metaverse Executive Series. My name is Jeff Hanks. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Unity for our industry business, and I will be moderating the Q&A towards the end of the meeting. Today, in this 4th episode, we have a very special guest joining Ryan. Teemu Tuukka, the CEO of Ready Player Me, will be joining and having a conversation with Ryan about the metaverse, about avatars in the metaverse, and talking about where we see things going in the future. In a moment, I'm going to invite Ryan on to join, but before I do so, let me cover a few housekeeping topics. As always, we will be recording this and making it available to all attendees in the days following the webinar. So look for that in your email in the next couple days. We will be going for about 35 to 40 minutes with Ryan and Teemu, and then we'll be shifting to a Q&A. So please start posting your Q&A questions. We have a lot of people on this webinar already. We'll get to as many of the questions as we can. If we have a ton of questions, we'll probably interrupt Ryan and Teemu a little bit earlier to give them a chance to answer more questions that you might have. So with that said, again, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to invite Ryan on and thank him again for joining us now for our 4th episode. And over to you, Ryan.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Jeff. I'm really excited to be here, especially with our special guest today, Teemu Tuukka. Just want to, just as a refresher, through this whole series, we've been really talking about the user and investing with technology with a purpose on delighting our users. So wherever industry that you're from and you're thinking about the metaverse, it's not about making some world that no one visits. It's about delighting your users. And there's really a way to frame it is it's about touching the digital you. There's really and creating experiences that allows your brand or your company to extend yourself to really touch 2 sides. There's kind of the digital twin of yourself, which I think everyone has some sort of Fitbit or Apple Watch of like your own life data that you want to touch base, or hyper personalization when it comes to your brand and touching and understanding your customer. But in the metaverse, we have these things called personas or avatars, and you can have a lot of unique avatars. And this really today is about exploring what the metaverse is beyond just the digital representation of yourself. Because a persona can be a perception of many different things, whether or not you want to be a creative artist, or you want to be a DJ, or you just want to consume content and expose the inner you, whatever that may be. And what's also interesting is you can be multiple versions of you in the metaverse. In fact, you can live in with multiple different realities. And so it's an interesting concept besides just who I am physically and the digital mirror of myself and all the information that makes me personalized. There's this opportunity to truly express yourself beyond just who you are day to day in your life. And so that kind of brings us to these avatars. I think are kind of a key form of the stylized version of yourself, or that, that digital human, the digital exact copy of yourself, and how you interact with one another. And today's conversation is going to be around what avatars means, what does interoperability mean across the metaverse, and even just talking about Web3 in general. What does it mean, and what are some of our thoughts? And specifically, Teemu Toke's thought, a true pioneer in the space. There's a great article that was going through LinkedIn, and they had this picture of everyone talking about that the metaverse is a big list. Then there's people writing about the metaverse, another big list. Then there's a few people that are actually building it. And this is why I think Ready Player Me and Teemu was really one of those pioneers in the space. So Teemu, if you can put your camera on, that'd be great. We can kind of start hopefully a great conversation today. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for a great intro. I'm very excited to be here and speak about the metaverse and avatars.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I have to say, it would be great to start out of, you're an entrepreneur, and I love to say this as CEO and co-founder. It'd be great if you could start with, what was that aha moment that inspired you when to start your company, Wolf 3D? But also, I think this pivot to Ready Player Me, where did this kind of come from? And great to start a conversation there.
For sure. Yeah, so first, I think the first point of starting to understand virtual worlds was being a gamer growing up. I grew up in Estonia, in a small city, so playing games was a great thing to do, great entertainment. And RuneScape was the game I played the most,
Awesome.
And my first kind of hustle was selling RuneScape gold to other kids in school. So it was kind of like obvious that virtual currency and virtual assets and stuff are kind of connected with the real world, and it's like powerful. And that led me to explore kind of 3D and games and so forth, and 3D printing and 3D scanning when I was growing up. So I was just messing up with 3D printing and 3D scanning objects and 3D scanning people. And we started the company when I was 20. And it was like at the same time when Oculus was acquired by Facebook. And we realized that VR is probably going to be a thing, and it's going to be social. And in avatars and in VR, avatars play a huge role in how you communicate with each other and how you present yourself, of course. And the general trend of people just spending more time in virtual worlds, and virtual worlds being a big part of our life and bigger part of our time. And that's what we started. And the goal was just to create an easy way for people to create an avatar of themselves and eventually figure out how to make that avatar travel across worlds. It was kind of like create a database of scans or avatars and then connect it to different games. That was kind of like the initial idea. And then it evolved over time. We kind of stopped doing hardware and went over kind of custom building out to tech for big gaming companies like Tencent and Huawei and HTC and Vodafone and Verizon, not just gaming. And we did that for 4 years. So we built dozens of avatar systems from scratch. And that's how we really learned what it takes to build a great avatar system and what it takes to build a great developer tool. And then eventually, drop the kind of a cash flow positive business around building out our tech to kind of an end-to-end product for developers, which is Ready Player Me. And that was like 2.5 years ago. So combined 9 years of making avatars.
Overnight success.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Like we were doing our own planning for the next years, and we kind of commented that metaverse itself kind of really started to pick up a part of the narrative through the rest of the world last year. What do you think that was kind of the aha moment that this became a bigger thing? I mean, I actually look at jobs, it's like McKinsey, metaverse lead globally. It's like every company seems to be jumping in. Well, like why now from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think like the pandemic definitely kind of kickstarted it a little bit, and also we launched RTMV on the kind of first month, the second month of the pandemic, really when lockdown started. So it was like kind of a perfect time in that sense. And it started from like companies exploring ways they can communicate better than video calls, like VR meetings, virtual events, like stuff like that was kind of like the first thing we were focused on, and that's kind of really got a lot of attention. But the second part is like, we were kind of locked at our homes, living in a virtual world already, just in a more 2D virtual world. And I think it became more obvious for people that like, those worlds would become more 3D, and we're kind of already living in a virtual world. And there will be like a next generation of like video calls, for example. And I think that all kind of like put the people's minds in the right spot. And one other important thing is the Web3 kind of games movement, which came with a more open and kind of decentralized mindset of building the metaverse. So and I think those things combined kind of created the perfect storm for people's like kind of collective consciousness to get to a point where it became obvious. And obviously the technical limitations are getting solved. There's a whole generation of like 10 to 15-year-olds that are already living in a virtual world, Roblox and Fortnite. That was already the case before the pandemic, and that was like, for us, that was a really like a big sign back then that really gave us like, made it more obvious that this thing will continue, and like we should continue and like continue to try to figure it out. So yeah, all those things combined.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talk internally, there's this whole, I call it metaverse natives that are coming up, and frankly, hundreds of millions that are coming from Roblox and Minecraft. I have my 8-year-old kids are like, they're building these worlds. It's like unbelievable. And they're going to be hopping into things like Unity as their next step to be, I think, creators.
Yes.
So I want to touch upon something that you said there is around like Web3, decentralization. You just released, I believe, like API or interoperability. Maybe just start your definition of interoperability. And you talk about these Web3 games. What's going to be that transition from these walled gardens of like Roblox and Minecraft and Fortnite to what I think the vision of interoperability and connecting these different universes?
For sure. So I would maybe start from like why we think interoperability is important, and then like kind of like what it is for us basically. And so interoperability is important because there's kind of two paths for the future of the metaverse. One is a more centralized path where we will end up living in one or a few kind of big virtual worlds, and like they make the rules, and they're like, they're not like the big platform owners. That is not a good future for the metaverse, we think. The other version is a more decentralized and open metaverse where you can navigate between your pages or different worlds. It's more like the internet than like a kind of a one centralized world. It's built by millions of creators and developers, and we think that is a positive future. And for the open metaverse to really have a chance against the kind of the centralized platforms, there need to be cross-game services and standards and protocols that kind of connect those virtual worlds together. So you need to have an avatar that travels with you across worlds. You need to have, wallets, money, like all kinds of data you need to carry through two worlds, and that is interoperability. The kind of the ability to carry, your kind of assets and your identity and so forth across worlds to have a more consistent experience. And interoperability kind of results in the real metaverse, which is like a network of millions of worlds that you can navigate between that are somewhat consistent and feel like, they don't all look the same, but they're like consistent in terms of how you can experience them. And they're like a network. Yeah. So that's kind of like how we think about it. And avatars are just a big part of it. Very important parts, like your identity is like your avatar is naturally persistent across platforms. Like you have it everywhere, you need it everywhere. It doesn't make sense to have 1,000 different avatars. So it's just like it's a need, and it's a good way to start breaking down the walls and also kind of prove the world that building an open kind of system, an open game, a world is better. Like you can sell assets for our avatars to travel across the metaverse instead of being stuck in your game, which most likely will, increase this market size for avatar assets. You can allow kind of brands and stuff to sell assets on their websites that start working in many games in the metaverse. So there are a lot of benefits just to like the users and to the developers. And our goal with just avatars is to explain or like show the world that this is a better way to do things, and hopefully kind of tip over a big part of the creators to build more open, for builders.
Yeah. So I want to touch on something like, I'm going to do word association. So when I say NFT, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Yeah, so the first thing that actually comes to my mind is the 2 Bored Apes I sold for what we combined 1.2 ETH. That's like, that was painful. And it still is, I guess. So anyways, but actually like, I think NFTs equals ownership. So that's how we kind of think about it. And like, if you need to manage the ownership of a digital asset across many different platforms, then you need to have some kind of a database where you store that ownership. And like, it can't be one of those games, right? It can't be a centralized it shouldn't be a centralized database eventually. It should be blockchain, right? Like, blockchain is the best way to do that. It like exists kind of on top or next to all the different experiences. And that's where the ownership is stored. And then, all those different games can kind of tap into that and use that in their experiences. So NFTs are just the way to create real cross-game ownership. If you just have a centralized game, like you could have a centralized database, yes, like it's and like achieve a similar result in that sense, like CSGO skins and so forth. And yes, they could like switch it off and you don't actually own those assets. But for the end user, I'm not sure if the difference is big enough for them to care. But if you really want to build like a cross-game scaled economy of assets, you need to have some kind of a database that stores that ownership, and blockchain is like the obvious way to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, a lot of stuff. My first word I think about is actually community, right? There is something when you can create a community around an asset and a creator, we call it a lot of, this creator economy that's going to kind of pop out where people are exchanging and trading value. I look at the internet, we think of, like, you talk about standards and open standards, like the internet protocols really is like the end of 2012. Like it took 20 to 30 years for the internet to become what we think of it as today, what Web 2. We think of Web 3 and we think of what's in, I think, your imagination and my imagination, not my imagination, what we're building. Like, where are we on that journey to kind of see interoperability, trusted, who are the other trusted anchor companies that we need to collaborate with to make what you just talked about, the exchanging of value and creation and storing, storing ownership. There's a lot of dominoes that have to fall. Maybe give me some comments around that.
Yeah, totally. So, and that's also like why the Web3 world is so important in this whole journey of the metaverse becoming more like kind of like for us to figure out standards and for us to be more open, is because this world, like the Web3 world, and by the way, like maybe 20 to 30% of our partners are like core kind of Web3 experiences. The rest are like everything else. So, but anyways, the kind of the Web3 core market is philosophically aligned with the idea of an open and more connected metaverse. So when they're trying to build a game, even without that being like practical on day one, they prefer to have interoperable avatars, for example. They prefer to build a system where they are not the centralized party. They prefer to build a system where there's no walls around them, right? So, and that is like because they're philosophically aligned with where they want to see the metaverse going. Like they want to build a more open metaverse. And that early group kind of helps us build a kind of like open metaverse kind of prototype that shows that this is a better way. Like if you sell cross-game assets, the economy is going to be bigger. If you have cross-game avatars, it's going to be a better user experience. Like all those things will be proven by this like philosophical kind of group in that sense that just wants to push the world towards a more open metaverse. And then it just becomes, or needs to become, a no-brainer business decision. So if you're starting to build a game, you're like, should I build a cross-game, should I build a closed outer system or cross-game outer system? Well, I can sell stuff to the entire metaverse. I probably like, it's a better business for me, right? So like, I'll build it because it's a practical business decision. And we need to get to that point to make all of the kind of like the rest of the world and the rest of the builders and creators of worlds to follow, essentially. Because yeah, just the philosophical reason is not enough. But it's what we need to build a prototype, essentially.
Yeah. So, and it'd be interesting to get your perspective on this, is that we're seeing, I am seeing a lot of fascinating work, actually in Southeast Asia, the APAC region. Your company was founded in Estonia. It's like,
Yeah.
North America, a lot of the innovation is happening, and I think it's inspiring and like investment. Are you seeing the same type of thing in terms of your partners, where like the hot spots are for innovation for people to watch out for?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely more kind of decentralized in that sense, like in terms of the location. I'm from Estonia. That's where we have like, you know, roughly half of the team, that's a little bit less. I'm based in New York. You know, still the biggest and the best investors in the world are in the US. You know, like the best kind of executives for a lot of things you want to build are here. So I would say like it's the company that started in more places and also ran for more places than before. But for us, it was still important to be in the US, and for me to like have access to the best talent and capital and so forth. But yeah, it's less important, I think, especially in the Web3 space. It's like more and more like geography is not that important, and we're a remote first team, so we have teams everywhere. But yeah, I would say that's not only the case in the kind of metaverse space, though. It's like, you know, kind of it's like Silicon Valley is not the focus anymore for all the kind of progress, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. That's my feeling.
No, that's interesting. And then what is, so I have to say, I went to, I think it's amazing. You've been at this for years. You go to Ready Player Me. If you haven't, please go to the website. And creating the avatars, take a picture, upload, and it's just seamless user experience. And you're taking something very complex and really trying to simplify it. Maybe, you know, give it some of your thinking behind to actually get to that point, because I think it's a lot of work to make something with 2 clicks of a button.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So like in the Ready Player Me kind of auto creator experience, the first thing is snap a selfie. And we kind of do our best job to kind of predict your face shapes and stuff like that to give you a good base to start from. You know, that whole thing started 9 years ago when we built our first hardware, right? So like we built hardware, we scanned tens of thousands of people. We built like a deep learning solution that takes a single selfie and converts that to different styles of avatars. And that was our business, like selling that SDK. And you know, and that was kind of the core product. So, you know, it's been a long time building that tech. It's been a long time building dozens of avatar systems from scratch for those bigger companies, and then like eventually figuring out you know, the best way to do that, and also like what the avatar needs to look like stylistically. Like, is it like too realistic? Is it too cartoony? Like, there's going to be several styles, but like the first one, just nailing that also was, you know, our experience from building dozens of avatar systems from scratch. And generally, like, we just try to make everything as simple as possible, you know. So that's obvious, but it's hard. Like, it's easier to add, you know, bells and whistles and buttons and like all this stuff. We're trying to like, you know, remove if possible. And also just like the first version of Ready Player Me for developers was just a super easy, right? Like super simple, even like too simple in terms of the developer tool. It wasn't flexible enough for a lot of use cases and stuff. And now we're adding like, you know, flexibility, complexity, or whatever, like not complexity, but flexibility, more features, more capabilities, but starting from something that is extremely simple. And on the end user side, yeah, like it's number one for an average kind of user that just wants to jump into the experience as fast as possible. They can snap a selfie, get something that they are satisfied with, and jump in. For someone that really wants to go in detail, like we're now expanding on that, so you can customize all the small details of the avatar and like the coding and everything. So like there needs to be a product for both, like someone that really wants to spend like a half an hour creating an avatar, and someone that just wants to get in as fast as possible. But yeah, it all needs to be simple, as minimal as possible.
I spent my time, RuneScape, I'm the World of Warcraft person, spent Horde forever, by the way. I have to say that. But we think about that there's probably a number of companies on this brands and thinking about like, what is my first step to the metaverse? And I think I like the way you're talking about the simplification. But if you're a brand out there and you're wanting to say, okay, first of all, what is this thing? Like, where do you start from your perspective?
Yeah. So we work with a lot of brands, fashion brands like Adidas and New Balance and Tommy Hilfiger and so forth, and also like IP owners like Warner Brothers and NBC Universal and so forth. So yeah, I think like just and like what they do is basically they create outdoor accessories, assets that you can wear across thousands of games to Reddit family. And like what they want to do is like take part of the virtual economy. So if you're a real world brand or you've created valuable IP, the metaverse is like an opportunity for you to monetize that brand or that IP. So if you're Adidas, for example, like you see how big the kind of metaverse avatar economy is going to be in like a decade, for example. If you manage to use your real world brand to like take a part of that market as well, that's like, that makes sense for your business. And it also, from a user's perspective, brands are a way we kind of express our identities in real life, and that will also happen, or a way we do that. And that will also happen in the metaverse. But just as a suggestion as a brand, I will think about the long term, kind of like try to make experiments to understand how you're going to play in the market long term, or trying to do something a little bit different than anyone else has done and make it a marketing campaign and like that's it. So you won't learn too much about that. It's just like a cool thing to do that every brand is doing at the moment, versus like doing small experiments to understand where can you fit in over the long run, and really like try to make it an important part of your business, So that's how we try to approach working with brands. If it's an obvious short-term marketing thing, we're not too excited about it. What we are excited about when we work with brands is like, just trying to get to a business as usual, like, based on metrics, based on revenue generated, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's key. I mean, there's this shift from the world like 2D to 3D, and there's a technological shift. It's like even just managing assets and your whole pipeline. And I'm sure there's companies like, what is Unity, and how are we going to do this? This like just kind of a lift and shift of even your workforce and a mindset in 3D. How are companies and how are you seeing companies make that shift and go on that journey?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. It's hard. Like it takes time. It's a completely different skill. They usually need to build a new team. I think some companies are starting from like working with agencies and then trying to kind of build an internal team around things. I think that's the right way to do it. A lot of brands have taken it very seriously and kind of built internal teams that can create 3D assets and like really are investing properly. But yeah, it's a struggle. It's like the core mindset of doing things in like not in a 3D space, not in a virtual world, like, and then just jumping into that world is very hard. It takes time, I think, and experimentation and investment.
And I think there's it almost seems that there is some hesitation, especially in the video game industry around Web3 games. People are like, there's this like visceral reaction. Oh, we can't be doing Web3 games. I think it's on that journey, but I think that was like in the mobile games, like free to play. Well, that's terrible, but it was like access to users. Like, how do you think that maybe the industry is going to be changing over time, and what's going to be that that moment where people really accept, no, this is more than just like that visceral reaction disappears?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's when we stop talking about NFTs as a concept or as a way to speculate, as a speculation tool. And by the way, like that's a whole market that like is like fun to do, like collect things, speculate. I have a lot of NFTs myself just to understand how this like thing works, but it's not a big market, right? So like that's not going to power the metaverse. So anyways, like it's when we start talking about NFTs and we start talking about them building things that actually bring out the value of NFTs bring, like that they can that NFTs can provide, nothing else can't, right? And that is like the cross game aspect of NFTs. Like you can buy something from a game and you find utility for the for owning that thing in somewhere else as well. Like that's the obvious thing that NFTs need to get to for them to be valuable. That goes back to the previous answer of like database that manages the ownership of something across platforms, right? So like that's kind of like the obvious thing that needs to happen. But yeah, and I think, you know, companies can do a better job to like also, I guess for the user, the question is like, why does it matter this thing is an NFT versus not? You know, like we should do things that make that matter. And then like people want the thing that it provides, not the concept of an NFT or like the promise of promise of ownership, the actual like benefit you get from owning something.
It's not like a story. It's not a picture of an ape, but it actually is the utility. I agree. That's a key piece. And you see the technology and you see the use cases, but companies have to adopt and adapt it within their infrastructure. And there is this transition I think companies are going to make. We talked about Roblox and Fortnite, and there's a lot of talk of like interoperability, but there's still this, even Facebook. It's like the people are building walled gardens. When do you think this new generation, and by the way, you are that new generation of businesses that are going to like open that up? Like I still see companies frankly making the wrong investment from our point of view, where there's companies like yours are actually really opening it up and driving what the true vision of this is going to be. And I actually think it's creating that value for the user.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think like if you are the monopoly or the big player, right, then like your kind of instinct is to close and build walls. If you are the new generation, then like you're gonna want to open up essentially. So that's kind of natural. And I think the kind of new Web3 world is going to, you know, kind of big enough, not just the Web3 world, but just the open metaverse will be powerful enough at some point that the bigger ones have to tip over as well. And also like there will be closed metaverses, and that is fine. And there will be games that are like, that have no interoperability. And I love that as a gamer. Like I want to go into a story and play that story and play that game. And like, that's awesome. But there's going to be hopefully the biggest part of the metaverse, which is more social, which is more kind of like the metaverse, more kind of like social, I would say, that is going to be open. So, and the big ones, it's hard to see. Like maybe they'll figure out, maybe they'll open up, maybe they will remain closed and be big enough to build a big business around that. But they're definitely not going to be the first ones opening up.
So there's so one more like just conversational piece before we kind of move to Q&A, and I see lots of questions. So Jeff is getting ready, but the metaverse, we think of devices. Is it VR? Is it AR? Is it any screen? I mean, do you have an opinion around that? Like, is there some sort of like that tipping point that's going to happen in devices, or we're already into it? Like, it'd be great to get your view on that.
Yeah. I mean, like the 10 or whatever, 8 to 15-year-olds, basically, they spend all the time in virtual, like a lot of time in virtual worlds already, to a phone, you know, through any device, basically. And they have more interaction with their friends, you know, to a virtual world already, even without VR and AR. We think about VR and AR now, it's like, those are just like incredible tools to make virtual world even more useful and even more immersive and even more cool. And that will just drive the, you know, kind of the transition to the virtual world or the growth of virtual worlds even more. But even with the hardware we have today, it's already happened, you know, like almost 3 billion people play games. Like we're already enjoying lots of virtual worlds. Like that's already here. So we can definitely, like, with the current tech, we could be in the metaverse. It was more connected. I guess the connection tech and interoperability is not there, obviously, but like just the way the worlds are built and experienced. But yeah, all those kind of hardware improvements, more platforms, VR, AR, that will just accelerate it.
Awesome, and I absolutely agree with that. So I say it's any screen that works, and we have this generation. Jeff, welcome back. I know you have lots of questions for us, so I'm going to hand the baton to you.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. Yes, lots of questions coming in. They're coming in as I speak here. So we're going to get to as many as we can, folks. We probably won't get to all of them as in advance, but let's dive right in with the question for Timu. You touched a little bit on the role of avatars in the metaverse, but can you speak to specific use cases beyond game? Think of business, think of retail, What are the use cases do you see there?
Yeah, and oftentimes when I say games, I actually mean virtual worlds and virtual experiences more generally. And about like 30% of our network, which is 4,000 companies that use our avatars, but 30% of them are like games or game-like experiences, and the rest is everything else. And everything else is VR meetings, virtual meetings generally, virtual events, like all kind of stuff like that. There's a lot of education actually. And one of the bigger apps is like a maths kind of a education platform where you can, meet your teacher with avatars and do some exercises and stuff they do in a virtual world. There's a bunch of that actually. There's a lot of enterprise training. So training to use equipment, training to use all kinds of like stuff like that. Yeah, and like there's things like we've been building out for 9 years, and we see like things almost daily that we just could imagine could exist. There's a lot of fitness stuff coming up, where you are represented as an avatar that changes over time, based on what you do, or you have a trainer that is an avatar, or you are an avatar and you're like in a space together, or VR fitness apps, which are kind of big and coming up. So there's a lot of like things happening that are kind of using games technologies, but are not games as like the games we know. Yeah, and like I think the general kind of metaverse, like experiences, like the social virtual worlds, they're more targeted to a general kind of a social media user, maybe over like a hardcore gamer that like really likes to play a specific, style or genre or like anything like that. It's more kind of general in kind of like who they're built for as well. So, and that, yeah, there's a lot of kind of new developers around there, not hardcore game developers that are tapping into the, they're using Unity to like build worlds, that are tapping into the kind of the games technologies, but they're also approaching the way they're building those things like they were building a kind of a consumer app, like also the way they kind of like think about building it, like MVP, improve it over time. Like it's changing a lot.
Perfect, thank you. There's been a lot of questions around getting started, specifically some questions on how to work with your group, Ryan. Other questions, Timu, how do I engage with Ready Player Me? How do I become a partner? How do I get started there? So maybe one at a time, maybe Ryan go first, maybe talk a little bit about your organization, how you work with customers and companies. And Kathleen, if you wouldn't mind maybe posting the link to chat while Ryan speaks about this, then Timu can go next.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. There's I call that first step. I think there's as we're talking about the really understanding your user, and we actually have a really large design team actually. So we call it design-led engineering, and really trying to envision. And I love what Tima said earlier is we are looking at that 10-year journey, and there's a big mindset of taking advantage of your first dollar. I don't think there's no wasted experience. We don't believe in doing, really, this is not a proof of concept kind of stage. It's really understanding how is your brand going to change and how do you interact, frankly, with companies like Ready Player Me. These are going to be key partners for you as you kind of go on this journey. So I think that's the amazing thing with Unity, is that we're a bit of Switzerland of Switzerland to kind of base all your applications around, as we pull different data sources to kind of build those new experiences. So we really try to be the platform, and again, we have a large partner base, but it's really companies like Tima that would inspire us, and we point to. It's like, look, it's why we're doing this Road to the Metaverse series, is like really start thinking. They're really thought leadership around how you need to start interacting with these new virtual worlds. Tima, maybe you would jump in.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we also like have the Switzerland strategy in that sense, like being neutral, kind of a third party for avatars, and kind of like working with all parts of the ecosystem and connecting them together. But generally, yeah, we love to work with builders of worlds. We are also opening up kind of virtual fashion tools, so like virtual fashion creation tools, so we create any accessories and stuff for avatars, for Ready Player Me avatars, and eventually also sell them as NFTs and stuff like that. So we always love to work with developers of worlds, games, and so forth, and also creators of fashion. Where you can find us is readyplayer.me. We have you can sign up as a partner for free. You can start using the tools for free. So it's very easy to kind of like work with us. And you can also track me down from LinkedIn or other places, and I'll try to get back. It's a little hard at the moment, but I'll catch up.
Perfect.
I was just going to add, we were talking earlier about this lift and shift, that building those teams internally. And we do see a lot of our partnerships around actually just team augmentation to help you get started as you build up those teams and understanding the tech. And, we're investing heavily and make it easier. We have this thing called actually Unity Game Services, which is all your multiplayer infrastructure. And we were talking about open ID systems. Like those are things like that you want to have out of the box, not starting from scratch. So go ahead, Jeff.
Great. We had a lot of technical questions come in. I'm not particularly technical myself, so I'm gonna give a few of these a try. And if these are beyond the scope of the two of you, we can certainly follow up with some of the people asking these questions. But I want to try a few of these. One of the questions was, will Unity be the avatar pipeline system from the Ziva acquisition?
Yeah, I mean, just to touch upon that, Ziva is just really a tool for people to go build those realistic digital human avatars, and really so you can have like the next generation of digital humans. And you see in our investment and things like Weta, it's really our goal is to bring those tools out to the masses. And there's just so much rich content has to be created, and really, we're helping build, I say, the tooling and pipeline for companies like RTMV to plug into. So that's the creator economy we talk about, is that, but it's about making these tools accessible.
Great. Darcy asked about networks, and specifically whether the network that we use to support Web 2.0 today, is that good enough for Web 3D? What are the challenges with latency, for instance, when avatars are trying to interact and communicate?
Timo, do you want to take a shot at that?
Sure. Yeah, so latency is definitely a big problem. There's a lot of things that need to happen to to improve that. I don't know, like there's Matthew Ball wrote a great book about it's the metaverse. He actually breaks down some of the technical challenges there with the kind of the current network we have as well. And I think that's a good resource for that. I'm not like deeply technical in that field myself, so I don't have like a super deep answer there.
Well, I've just kind of add that it's interesting to look at the networks that have to be outlined from telcos around the world to kind of see the true vision to come true. Like when people 5G, there's a lot of 5G networks. It's a lot of 4.5G. Edge computing is a concept, like the real infrastructure is being built. But as those lights get turned on the globe, you're going to see, especially new devices that come out that support that, then there's those type of low latency networks have become more ubiquitous. But it's not necessarily necessary. We already have a generation of hundreds of millions. There's 3 billion gamers around the world, so you don't necessarily have to wait for those maybe what our imagination of a perfect experience is going to be. But that will come over time.
That's right.
Great. Here's a fun one. Maybe Les will look through your crystal ball a little bit. What are your predictions on how the metaverse will evolve as we're nearing the end of 2022 and looking into 2023 and beyond? What are some of the predictions you see?
Go for it, Timo.
All right. I think we'll have more and more applications that will bring in kind of more casual internet users, or not casual internet users, but not gamers, but is what I mean. I think that's going to be fun to see how a whole kind of new group of people start using avatars in virtual worlds and 3D worlds. There's a lot of stuff we see that is coming up that is kind of targeted for that. I think there will be more and more open systems that are actually going to scale and have users and so forth. Like our goal is to prove the value of interoperability. Avatars are kind of one obvious way to do that, but we expect to see other things and are excited to see other things that will kind of like our true cross game experiences. I think like the kind of the the fact that the market is down and the Web3 world is kind of quiet is actually great for making progress in the space. So people are kind of focused on investing long term, building experiences that are actually valuable, and thinking about the right things over, just like trying to flip shit. So that's kind of like, I think, good for the future of the metaverse.
Yeah, I just building on that, I think there's this thing called the crypto winter that people talk about, and it's really healthy to wipe out all the stuff that was did not have their users in mind, or we talk about technology with purpose, and the real work is being done in the background. I think of, that we're at the early stages of the web. And there was 30 years of work of standard creation and companies getting together to really understand what this Web 3 is going to be. And I go back to that that transition when I look at NFTs and ownership we're talking about. I think that's going to be the next transition of, like, you're going to have a lot of projects come alight where people are like, oh, that ownership and the value and utility, what that means. I think that's going to be the tipping point where companies are going to like, oh, this is not a scam. This is not, flipping shit, to quote. I love that. But, seeing the value of interoperability and over those technical hurdles. And I think it's a collection of companies that are working on that. And so that's the interesting piece. Like, there's the next Facebook, the next Google, the next Microsoft are going to appear. That's what's going to happen over the next 5 to 6 years.
You just mentioned Facebook or Meta. There's been a number of questions related to them, and I'm going to try to summarize all of them in sort of one question. The general consensus is, do you think Meta is helping or hurting the future of the metaverse? And some of the folks specifically called out this morning's earnings announcement from Meta, which was quite bad. They've been hit pretty hard. And so the question is, are we overplaying our metaverse hand? Is that an indication that Meta has perhaps gone a little bit too far, too fast?
Timo, what's your view? I have a view on this.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's hard to see if they're like net positive or net negative. It depends on what they're going to do as well. I think they obviously like made a big impact in or like they accelerated VR quite a bit. It's not quite here yet, but without Facebook or Meta investing so much money into that, we would be much further, right? So I think that's great that they've done that. I think it's interesting to see how much they are now going to be closed and want to open own the platform versus like kind of opening up. I think the mobile platforms are also not exactly very open in that sense. So let's see how VR plays out. But yeah, so I don't know if they're going to be positive or negative. I think when they made the shift, they didn't expect to have an immediate impact on their whatever earnings, right? Because they know they've built this thing from scratch, right? They know how hard it is. They know what the limitations are. They know how long it would take to figure it out. So I think it was just a very long-term kind of a narrative change for them. So we'll see if it pays off, in a decade probably. So did they need to do it now? Not, I don't know. I believe Mark Zuckerberg is pretty smart, and I'm definitely not gonna not in a position to like teach builders, founders like that anything. So let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if you have a long-term view, which Mark obviously does, then that's what they're building towards. And I think you have to really ignore the market. Like, the stock market is not a reflection of value creation. Yeah. It's a reflection of the mood of the market and where money's going. And so I definitely actually commend the vision, whether or not they're right or wrong. I mean, they are all in. And I would say that what Mark's definitely sees is he looks at someone like Timo on this stuff and is like, wow, if I'm not invested, someone's going to come around and take the throne. And I'm sure there's a lot of companies that we know. We talk about being blockbustered, that you just disappear because Netflix, what is this? This is not a thing, and they just get wiped out. Yeah. And so I do think that look at the commitment, and it's the same thing with cloud computing. Like, well, AWS, well, I thought you sell books. Well, think about how big cloud computing platform and how much it costs. Like, look at Microsoft and Google, they're still playing catch up on that head start. So, but I think, you know, Meta's going to have to decide, like, that interoperability. Are they building a closed platform, open platform? They're going on their own journey, but I think it's a reason to be doubling down in the space, not to be shying away.
Yeah.
Great. No, thank you both for that. Christopher asked about, he says, there's been a lot of talk about decentralization. Well, simultaneously, we're asking people to build for platforms. Doesn't it make more sense to create your own builds, hosted on your own server, and linked back to these other platforms?
Ryan, do you want to start?
I think that as a business, we see a lot of people, building on other people's platforms. So I'm going to go try to build something in Sandbox or Decentraland or whatever may platform, or I'm going to jump in to use VR chat and, as an organization, or even using, we just saw Meta, the Horizons as a platform. I think actually those are really good first steps. A longer term, though, I think you do want to have your own version, you're hosting your own data, not be dependent on other individuals. You want to be, but I could go the Switzerland is that you're going to be supporting thousands of different virtual worlds, thousands of different platforms, especially with your own assets. So you have to have that own mindset of creating those infrastructure and actually creating the partnerships with companies like Ready Player Me, Unity. There's even Unreal plays a role in this world. Like, there's going to be a variety of different partners, and you have to understand the different platforms, different endpoints, and have a strategy. So I think that's a key piece. Learnings, apply to your business, and drive a strategy from it. I don't know, Timo, it would be great to get your view.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And just like tapping into any of the standards or protocols or services that exist to help you kind of be more open by still building your own, like building on other platforms, but sort of making it as open as it's practical today, essentially.
Timo, who do you look at as your competitors, and what differentiates your platform? What are I want to give you a chance to brag a little bit about Ready Player Me and talk about what makes it great compared to some of your competitors.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start the bragging from a part that we're most proud of, and that's that we built the platform to help developers with their avatar needs, to help developers get to the market faster, to help them in the future monetize better, and so forth. So like the number one thing we're always trying to do is work with more developers, work with more game builders, virtual world builders. We have more than 4,000 companies using our avatar tools. When we look at the competition, like it's dozens maximum. Like most likely it's a few companies they support, or even less. So like basically we are like way ahead with the developer adoption, and that's that's what we're proud of it. That we're proud of that because we built a platform for developers first, right? And that's what really matters if you're building in a cross-game avatar, avatar system. So you need to have cool games, cool experiences for people to want to use your avatar, essentially, right? So like the more developers we work with, the better that is for end users as well. So yeah, and who we see as our competition, I mean, Meta is definitely potentially competitive, at least on their platform. They have Meta avatars, they're usable in their ecosystem. Yeah, so that's that. But they have a very different strategy being closed and so forth. And yeah, well, I'm just trying to find out things I can say or not. So, and then there's Genies, that is like an avatar creator that has raised a lot of money. They don't have a product out there yet. They're not planning to build developer tools, developer SDKs. They're building like an end user facing avatar, which looks cool, and then avatar kind of fashion creation tools. But ultimately, with avatars, like the only question that really matters in the end is, where can I use it?
Yeah.
If you can't use the avatar anywhere, or if you can use it in less places, the avatar is less useful. So like that's why we're very focused on making sure that we can answer that question well, and we can bring great developers into the network and help them with your avatar needs, and then over time, have more and more places where you can use the avatar that are cool and that are fun and exciting and useful. So that's how we think about it. We're definitely leading the market at the moment, and we are working hard to make sure that's continues to be the case.
Good, thank you. Let's shift over to Ryan. I'm hearing a lot of avatar in the single sense. Is there much attention paid in modern platforms to the fact that they like to step into many different avatars, but sometimes come back to one, quick switching? I know you've talked about that before in episode 1. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Oh, I mean, I think there's, this is my personal view, is that we all have personas that we want to go explore in these different universes. I myself am exploring my musical persona and how I go play and express myself in that fashion. As well as I'm going to have, and I love what we're just talking about, there's your fitness persona. What does that look like, and what motivates you? And I do think that, as I go out and I'm going to an event today, a lunch, give a speech. So I'll have my suit on jacket afterwards. Well, that's a representation of how I want to be seen. So I think that's a really interesting piece with avatars. You'll be mixing and matching different aspects and different goods, and it's going to be. And I really do see a world where there are multiple avatars that can travel with you. I also look at an age, and actually, I want Timo to answer this question I didn't get to, was around like AI assisted avatars. You can, in fact, be in different places, and be that reflection of yourself that people interact with you. This concept is I could be in 2 places at once. I think that's one of those things in the next 5 to 10 years that you're going to start seeing. It's really interesting. Be interesting to get your view on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely people will have several avatars for, like, how I think about it is like people create avatars for use cases. So you haven't, like, you create your social media profiles almost. It's like a LinkedIn profile that is more targeted for professional kind of use case. You show yourself your kind of professional avatar there. Go Instagram, it's more crazy, fun, whatever, like for friends and so forth. And you show a different type of avatar there. That's the same way people create their avatars, visual avatars, like 3D avatars as well. So you have a professional avatar that doesn't have face tattoos and has like maybe a jacket on. You'll have more crazy avatars, for games with your friends. And you might have avatars that are not like you at all. You definitely will have avatars that are not like you at all, or like more kind of fantasy experiences or places where you go where you don't meet people that you know already, and so forth. So like there's going to be a spectrum of different avatars, but you will want to use them inside the use case somewhat consistently. Phil Barzadell and the founder of Second Life, the original metaverse, he said they kind of tried to promote people to use several avatars, and made it very easy in the UI and so forth. But people always ended up just using one kind of identity and just like customized clothing and stuff like that, but have a very consistent kind of identity. But that is like one use case in that sense, like one world. Across many worlds, there'll be several identities, but they'll be consistent inside the use case.
I'm gonna jump in. We have about 2 minutes left. Timo, a lot of people are asking what's coming next for Ready Player Me. Questions around towards photorealistic avatars. Do you want to just touch briefly on anything that you can share about what's coming next for Ready Player Me?
For sure. So when we think about what we're going to do next, number one, we're going to think about developers. What can we build to make the tools better for developers, more flexible for developers? I think we're very focused on building now is content creation tools. So anyone can create skins and assets and avatar fashion and accessories and stuff like that easily. And that's like on the partner side that are building with Ready Player Me, or also like individual fashion creators, brands, and so forth as well. And then monetization after that. So like making it easy to sell those things as in-game purchases, as NFTs and so forth, to help developers really kind of take part of the metaverse economy. And that's also a big part of kind of proving that interoperable, avatars are better because they are a wise business decision for you as well. So those are the kind of things we're building. Yeah.
Great. Well, we're just about at time. I want to thank Ryan and Timo especially for joining us today. I want to thank everyone for coming on. Reminder, the recording will be sent out in the next 2 to 3 days. Look for that in your email. You'll be able to see the entire webinar along with all the questions that were answered. I also want to put in a plug for our next Road to the Metaverse episode, which is on December 6th. At 9 a.m. Pacific time, we'll be welcoming the head of Capgemini's Metaverse Lab, as well as the head of Emerging Technologies to talk about trends that we expect to see in 2023. Lastly, if you have any questions or would like to talk to Ryan and his team, feel free to reach out on their website at unity.com/solution/accelerate-solution. We'd love to work with you and talk with you about how we can help you achieve your metaverse goals. With that, thank you very much. I hope everyone has a wonderful day.
Thank you. It's awesome,
Thank you so much. Yes. All right. Bye-bye.
everyone.